I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today where I was trying to explain how optimization leads to fragilization. And this is, I
Yes.
feel like what you're getting at here. And this is another thing that I learned from Taleb. And Joe Norman speaks to this very well, where when you have a system and you choose a single variable and you sacrifice everything else to go after that variable, inevitably the system starts failing in various ways that you maybe could see coming, but in many ways you won't see coming also.
Yes, 100%. To your point, your equation that you use to select those variables to optimize, the variables you left out are the ones that are going to come back
Yeah.
to slap you in the face. You get what I'm saying? So it's one of those situations where you look at it, and I was talking to Paul and Mike on the last episode where we're talking about these ideas. And let me give you a clear-cut example of how this can go really, really badly. So what happened was a bunch of quote unquote stats guys looked at the game of basketball and they said, is there such a thing as the hot hand fallacy?
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
I listened to that podcast and this was fantastic. Please go on. I'm glad you're getting into my podcast too.
Yeah. So I wanted to share that idea, which was like, okay, there's a guy playing and he's draining threes. He's got the hot hand, pass the ball to him. Everybody thinks that way, but the quote unquote statistician guys are like, no, that's not true. It's just a fallacy. So they looked at a bunch of data for about 1 year of the Boston Celtics, and they said, oh, according to the data, this is incorrect.
Yep.
So everybody said, "Oh, statistics, data, science sounds sciencey, sounds good. I
I
agree with
remember
this."
reading that and going like, yeah, it's not real.
Right? Because again, we fell into the trap of assuming that somebody who claims statistics, science, and data, as soon as those words are thrown, what
Yeah.
ends up happening is they actually put you in a prison. The prison they put you in is the prison of assumption of what those words mean to you, when it could be the total opposite of it. Right? If I said science to you, you assume hypothesis, testing, theory, validation, data, blah blah blah. But what if I don't mean it that way? Right? You don't know that. So anyway, what happened was they said, yeah, according to the data, it doesn't pan out. But reality is it's actually far more complicated than that. So the way it works is, what if the other team noticed that, hey, you know what? This guy's draining threes. Let's go double up on him. Let's go triple up on him. Right? Let's
Yes.
go give him no room to do it. Let's give him a little bit of a hard foul. And on his way back for defense, what if he pulled a hamstring? Right? All those factors are completely removed from the equation, so you don't see those. It's kind of like the kid with volleyball, right? He was
Yeah.
flying. We threw in a variable he couldn't see, which was, what if we threw up 4 blockers at you? 4 is a lot more difficult to block against than 3, right? So you're going to have a difficult time. So the hot hand fallacy, and part of the, because I knew that story, that's how I came up with the idea of let's throw up 4 blockers. I said, listen, he's getting this easy because this is perfectly set up for him. Let's just switch it around. And so, same thing with the basketball analogy. And what the problem I have with that whole hot hand fallacy issue is that bit of knowledge that was improperly derived, poorly constructed, became fundamental truth for the next guy's assumptions. And they built all
Yes.
those other theories on top of that. And this is where you start to look at the whole idea of rationalia, and why, to take a little conversation in Neil Tyson deGrasse's direction.
Mm-hmm.
Let's create a planet called rationalia. Yeah, well, look where that's going to take you, right? As you start to abstract things, as you start to optimize for things that you think are actually correct, you're forgetting a couple of points of view. First of all, whatever you think is working bounded in space and time, and it's going to run into those boundaries very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What looked like it was working in 2000 is not going to work in 2008 when the financial market collapses. What looks like, rationally, oh, look, here's my quant guy, here's my 50 servers, we're running the math on this. Doesn't work. Right?
Yeah.
And the reason it doesn't work, and I'm gonna make it very interesting for your users and listeners, is the following. Everybody follows these concepts based on game theory. Right? So you model it out, and game theory tells you exactly what your opportunities are, but they forget that the market prices everything in. And so what we specialize in is we look at the concept of what's called the Kobayashi Maru. Have you heard of the Kobayashi Maru?
No, this is new to me.
Okay, so you're gonna love this. So this is basically an idea from Star Trek, right? So what they
Okay.
did was, as they're training cadets to become captains, they put them in a situation where they're supposed to have no wins. So essentially, you're
Hmm.
supposed to die during the simulation as your ship is under attack. But James Kirk actually knew that was the setup. So what he did was he cheated against the cheat. So he went in and he hacked the program so that it doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to. Right. So he pulled what's called the Kobayashi Maru. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, what does that have to do with reality and how do we work with that? Well, think about it this way. Game theory assumes rational actors across the board.
Right.
Okay. Let's give you a perfect clear-cut example of how this could be gamed. So you're Vladimir Putin and I'm the US president. You're going to sit there and you're going to say, okay, what do we know about Ace? Give me everything there is to know about Ace. I want to know where he grew up, what everything that we could possibly get. Let's get all that information in. Now you've game theory modeled me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I decide to adopt Donald Trump's tactics. I'm a madman. Now what happens, right? So now the Kobayashi Maru doesn't work anymore. Sorry, the game theory doesn't work anymore because I've just Kobayashi Maru'd you. I'm unpredictable, which means you can't predict what I'm going to do, which means you can't be on offense anymore. You have to play defense now. And the way that works is the way you win at strategic games that are higher level is you don't give your opportunity for your opponent to play offense. You make them so worried about you that they're constantly setting up for defense. And that's how you create stability in certain situations. So if you and I are pulled in by cops and you're being interrogated in one room and I'm being interrogated in another room, they're playing the game theory prisoner's dilemma model against us, right? So what I would tell you before we go rob that bank and say, hey, listen, Jeffrey, here's what we're going to do. Okay. When they put you in the room and they put me in the room, this is what they're going to try to do. Now, normally the best bet is you don't say anything and I don't say anything, but that's what they want us because that's what they're going to calculate into their heads. Let's do the opposite. I'm going to teach you what to say. And you're going to be like, okay, what do I possibly say to a cop that's interrogating me? Interrogate him. Whatever questions he asks you, assume that he's making up lies and say, wait a minute, how do I know what you're saying is true? I don't believe that. Show me the proof that you did that. Where's the camera? How fast was I going? Why did you pull me over? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So you're Kobayashi Maruing the cop who's game theory modeling you.
I think I've actually seen a video of a guy do that, like in a police parking lot to a cop. Like he started accusing the cop of the same things that the cop, like, what are you here? Like, what are you here for? You know, it was hilarious.
Right. Because if you think about it, what the cop has been trained to do is has been trained to model you from a game theoretic point of view. If I ask you these questions, so the way I ask you that question is how I'm framing your point of view.
Yeah.
If I frame your point of view, and all of a sudden those words I'm using are words that are going to paint an image in your head, like, oh, you're going to be in the slammer, and oh boy, they're going to love fresh fish, right? That type of thinking in your head all of a sudden dilutes your capacity to think. And so I learned this watching Jordan Peterson with that Kathy Newman interview. So when she was questioning him, you noticed his shift. He kind of subtle. He sits back and he stares at it. He goes, "Oh, this is the game we're playing."
Yes.
So what he starts to do is he goes, "What do you mean by that question? What does this word mean to you?" Right? All of a sudden, what the person who thought they were on offense gets put back on the defense because now they have to go back and they have to try to quote unquote define their words. And if the person has ill intent, what will happen is if you ask them to define the words that they're using in their question, they either have to reveal their ill intent or they have to dodge you, in which case now their ego is going to be brought into check because they're going to feel like, uh-oh, my attack didn't work, right? They're going to get frazzled and they're going to get in that, uh-oh, gotcha moment where they're going to realize that they got pulled one over them because they try to be, because as people engage with you in dialogue, the minute you detect that there's no good faith, stop answering, start asking questions. Yeah. That's the best thing to do, right?
Yes.
Because now it's defense.
So that actually reminds me of Bill Clinton dealing with Kenneth Starr, where he's like asking the definition. What is the definition of "is" you're using?
Exactly. Right. And most people look at that and they think it's absurd, but look, it works very, very effectively.
But it's brilliant.
It is. Because again, remember, when the other person's questioning you, and 99% of the conversations you're ever getting involved in, the person asking questions is usually the person who's in a position of authority. Why is that? How do we know that's true? Well, it's simple. As a kid, when you do something wrong, who's asking you, what did you do?
Right.
It's your parents, right? Then you go to school and it's a test. The test is basically a set of questions provided to you by an authority figure and your teacher. If you go to the doctor's office, your doctor's asking, what's wrong? What did you do? Where does it hurt, right? So the minute somebody asks you questions, subconsciously in your mindset, you're automatically infantilized. You're the child. You're answering to the authority figure, right? So if you know that going in, all of a sudden you go, pattern detection here. Let's exploit this asymmetry. This person wants to ask questions. I don't like the questions they're asking. I don't like their tone. I don't like their energy. I don't like their vibe. Let me flip it around on them, right? And the first question you ask back is very subtle. You say, I'm sorry, I'm confused. What does this word mean exactly before I go on and answer it for you? And if they had bad faith as they were, quote unquote, interrogating you, the mask will fall right off the bat because it takes a very highly trained person to know that, oh, wait a minute, he just took my shot and he returned it back in my direction. And they have to now engage in the second layer of deception to keep the game going. And most people aren't capable of doing that.
That's
The reason I
fascinating.
know the reason I know all this stuff is one of my uncles, when we were in Afghanistan, he was part of the I guess at the time what you could call like the KGB
Sure,
variation.
intelligence agency sort of
Right.
shit right here. Yeah.
Right. So his job, to save his family before he could leave, was to root out the enemy within the country, the ruling class that they didn't want part of it. And so he was brought in for training, and he was taught these tactics, and he was told, never, ever, ever answer a question. Always ask a second question back,
Hmm.
right? And so it says, "Who do you think you?" So here's the way that would role play out. So you come into the room, and I'm interrogating you, and I say, "Hey, where were you last night?" And you ask me, "I'm sorry, who are you?" Right? As soon as I see that, I go, "Oh, he's been trained." So instead of that, I just say, "Who do you think you are?" I'm the one who asks questions, not you. I'm going to ask you again. Where were you last night? Right? So
Yeah.
your little volley in my direction, I just recognize that, oh, this guy knows what's happening. Let me flip the script on him. I turn it back into another question by reinforcing the idea that I'm the authority figure. And so these tactics work on human beings. And the way we know it works on human beings is this. We'll go back to COVID. You know what? We got to stop the spread. We got to flatten the curve. Look at our models. Our model says if we don't do X, by the rate of growth, 50 things are going to happen, and the number is going to explode, and the hospital is going to crumble, and we're going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Now, any journalist worth their salt, and I say this, and I say to this day, journalism died the way Christopher Hitchens died. Christopher Hitchens was the last journalist that I remember who actually had the intellectual capacity and the moral courage to just stand up and say, "What? Who do you think you're talking to? That's not, I will not
A,
be put up.
a
I'll put
giant
this in
among
the whole
men.
put." Exactly. Right. So here's what happened. So I remember I had a conversation with a VC when I was pitching a company of mine, and I said, "Oh, here's our company. Here's our projections." He said, "Oh, stop! I don't care about your projections. None of that means anything to me." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Kid, do you understand how many projections I look at every day? And do you understand that almost none of them
Yeah.
actually come to truth?" I said,
Yeah.
"Oh," he goes, "I don't care about that." He goes, "Whatever your projections are, maybe I'm going to divide it by 100, and then I'll consider it even then, because now you're asking me for my money, which means you're putting my game, my risk on the line. I'm not going to take you at your word." So apply that same concept to, hey, the curve. Look at the number of cases; it's
Yes.
exponentially growing, right?
This is
Well,
yes.
why should I assume that everything you're saying is going to stay status quo and we're just going to explode?
Yeah.
Right. And now the politicians were also playing this other sneaky game. Every time they brought the numbers down, it was our strategy and it was my
Yeah.
brilliant thought and my science team told me this. But every time the numbers got bad, oh, it's you people. You people are bad. Right. So the
Yep.
asymmetry of power, that exploitation of authority figure to infantilize human being, was perfectly at play. But they had a second layer built into it, which was even more disgusting, which was they had the kid in school
Yeah.
who would tattletale on the other kids for walking in the hallway, right? The hall monitors. The number of hall monitors we got to see just boggles the mind. It's like, you know what, man? I get it, but what are you doing?